Hi, this is Reinhard from EverydaySystems.com. Today I'm going to talk about a free online tool I created for tracking your habits. It's called the HabitCal, short for Habit Calendar. A quick word of apology to listeners who are also active on the Everyday Systems bulletin board. You're probably sick to death of me talking about the HabitCal, but please bear with me. I think it might be interesting to other listeners who would never consider joining a bulletin board otherwise. So I want to make sure they get to hear about it. You may remember the term habit calendar from previous segments I've done. I've been talking about the concepts behind it for a while now, and I've already described how to keep a paper habit calendar. The online habit calendar works basically the same way, as I'll describe in a minute. I'm a big proponent of using the simplest possible technology to get the job done. But I actually think the online version is easier and gives you some extra benefits over the paper at no extra cost. Among other things, it's cheaper. A physical calendar and markers might be cheap, but they do cost something. The online HabitCal is 100% free. And there's a few more things that I'll get into in a minute. Here's how it works. First, you create an account if you don't already have one. It uses the same login system as the Everyday Systems bulletin board. So you have one of these. If you have one of these already, you're all set. Note to Yahoo users, if you have a Yahoo email, there's been some trouble with it getting put in the spam bin. So email me if you're having problems with it. Then come up with terms for one or more habits you want to track. These have to be single word terms, no spaces. It could be an everyday system of mine, like the no-S diet or shovel glove or glass ceiling, or it could be something completely different. You can track any habit using any terminology you like. You then bring up a calendar for each habit you select, for whatever time frame you select, and tick off every day whether you succeeded, failed, or were exempt from the habit. Successes light up in green, failures in red, exemptions in yellow. Exemptions are like S days for the no-S diet and shovel glove, where you officially have off. I call this simple scoring system, as you may remember, the habit traffic light, and it gives you a striking picture of how you're doing with your habits, even over large spans of time. You can see at a glance whether you've been doing what you set out to. Why did I come up with my own habit tracking system instead of using one of the technically excellent ones already out there? There are a bunch. Joe's Goals is a really nice one, for example. The reason is because technically cool as they may be, none of them work quite the way I want them to. They use complicated scoring systems that encourage bad ways of thinking about habit. When you're building a habit, you want to focus on a sustainable minimum level of compliance. Either you do what is required on a given day, or you don't, or you're exempt because nothing was required. Quantifying success beyond this is counterproductive. Why? Well, for one thing, it's more complicated, and complexity is bad. But more importantly, it's bad because you'll start to want to trade points, to think that heroic efforts yesterday can buy off the need to do anything today, or that efforts in one area can be exchanged for efforts in another. You think, I did extra good yesterday, so I can take today off, or I did extra exercise this morning, so I can ignore my diet this afternoon. Theoretically, these arguments sometimes make sense. You could balance things like this. The problem is that you can't do this. You can't trade unconsciously. And that's what habit is supposed to be, unconscious and automatic. When you trade, you're no longer tracking habits. You're keeping a ledger of conscious decisions. There's no automation. Your behaviors will stay conscious and hard. When the best you can do in a given day is success, and the worst is fail, you've got 4 big advantages. 1, it's very easy to score. You have to rack your brains a lot less than if you had multiple levels of success and failure to choose between. 2, you've got no surplus points to tempt you to trade. If your scoring system allowed a double success or a triple success, you'd inevitably feel like that bought you the right to buy a failure or two. 3, the habit traffic light lends itself very nicely to visualization. Not only is the green, yellow, red easy to understand and almost primally motivating, But it stays easy to understand even when you've got months or years or a lifetime of data. It scales well. 4. By keeping the scoring system this simple, you can meaningfully compare how different people are doing. Yes, no two people will make exactly the same calls about what is a success and what is a failure, but their judgments will be a lot closer than if they had to pick between levels of success and failure. This is useful personally on a diagnostic level because you can post to the bulletin board and say, hey, I'm having trouble, look at my HabitCal, and then people will be able to look at it and make some sense of it. It's also useful on an aggregate level. I haven't done this yet, but it would be neat to run summary analyses to mark particular times of year that people tend to have problems, or how many days or weeks into the system before people tend to start having problems. Or people could buddy up and set up some kind of combined picture of how they're doing. Ultimately, the point of a habit tracker isn't to track. It does track, but the tracking is just a means to an end, building a new habit. When you've reached that goal, you shouldn't really need a habit tracker anymore. I like to think that the HabitCal is so good at building habits that no one will have to use it for very long. But it's also so unobtrusive, it takes so little time and energy to keep current, just seconds to add whole weeks of data for multiple habits, that I can imagine people continuing to use it even after they've built firm habits, just to play it safe, for a continuing pat on the back. I started using it myself a couple months ago just to test it out, just to make sure it worked. I've been practicing my everyday systems habits for years, and I'm not seriously worried about them at this point. But I'm finding it strangely satisfying to make these ticks every day. Also, since we just had our second child and I'm writing this book, I've been immensely distracted and sleep deprived. So frankly, I am finding the HabitCal a real help in keeping on track, particularly with my exercise routine, Shovel Glove. Shovel Glove has been particularly challenging because it's the only routine, the only habit I'm practicing that takes any extra time. 14 minutes may not be a lot, but it's something, and time has become very, very scarce all of a sudden. I'm happy to say, thanks to the HabitCal, I haven't had a single failure in the month since my second daughter was born. I did take a couple S days while she was in the hospital, though. Anything you put on the HabitCal is public. Anyone can see it. I made it work this way intentionally. One, because it can get complex adding permissions, and because people will want certain people to be able to view it but not others. I also don't want to be liable for the inevitable goof that exposes information people expected to be private. But there's a positive reason too. It's motivating to know that other people, potentially at least, are keeping their eye on you. You have an audience for your struggles. You feel accountable to them. What are some other aspects of the online HabitCal that make it preferable to doing on paper? As I mentioned above, it's cheaper. This might not be much of a consideration if you're tracking just one habit, but if you're tracking multiple habits, it can add up. Plus, it's easy to see multiple habits over multiple months on one screen with the HabitCal. And to do that on paper, you need to chop up your calendar. It would take a lot of physical space, to see this all at once. You could do it, but it would be cumbersome. With the online HabitCal, another advantage is one click colors in the whole box for that day. So it's a big, uniform mark. You could color in the whole day on a paper calendar, but it would be tedious. Coloring in the whole day is more visually compelling than just making a little colored tick. The HabitCal has been operational for about a month now, and it seems to work and to be catching on. A bunch of suggestions for improvements have been submitted, but I'm not going to rush into implementing them, both because I don't want to risk breaking anything now that people are actually using it, and because I want to be very careful about cluttering up the nice, simple interface. But don't be shy about letting me know if there are things that you'd like me to change. The more people ask for a particular feature, and the more convincingly they ask, the more likely I am to get around to adding it. If the HabitCal does wind up changing considerably over the next few months, I'll do an update podcast to keep you all apprised. That's all for today. Thanks for listening.